Hello, buenas tardes, hello, good afternoon, welcome. Voy a hablar en inglés por nuestros invitados y también alumnos, evidentemente, de Elisava que están aquí. Welcome everybody, good afternoon. My name is Natasha Cristia. I'm a tutor in the Master of Photography and Design in Elisava, and I'm very, very happy to welcome you tonight to one further talk of Elisava Master's Talks. We are very happy to have here with us Kathy Ryan. We are very excited. We met Kathy yesterday. We are looking forward to her talk. So I would like to say welcome, Kathy. Welcome, Barcelona, Elisava, and at the Design Museum. And I would like to share, before her presentation, I would like to share with all of you some pieces of information of who Kathy Ryan is. Kathy Ryan is a very, very significant figure in the world of documentary photography, photojournalism, and editorial work in the last 4 decades. She has been the long-time director of photography at the New York Times Magazine. And in this task, she has been a pioneer in combining fine art photography with photojournalism and introducing photography and documentary photography in new contemporary visual languages, narratives, and discourses. Kathy has been working and accompanying in the work and in evolution photographers such as Ryan McGinley, Lee Friedlander, Nan Golding, Lauren Greenfield, and Gilles Perez, among others. Besides her amazing work as an editor in the New York Times Magazine. After 39 years of work in around the 2010s, she left her position to focus on her own artwork, combining curatorial work for exhibitions, teaching a course at Yale, and various speaking and lecture arrangements. In 2011, she edited the New York Times Magazine Photographs, a landmark book published by Aperture, and an accompanying exhibition curated by Kathy Ryan and Leslie Martin opened at the Rencontre d'Arles and the festival, the famous renowned photography festival in Arles in 2012, and then traveled to FOM Museum in Amsterdam, and also here in Barcelona in Palau Robert for those of us who are older and have visited and remember it. If you are interested also in the work, editorial and publishing work of Kathy Ryan, you could also consult the Office Romance, a book of her own photographs featuring her colleagues and the beauty and poetry to become in the New York Times buildings in the professional environment. She experienced her professional growth as a professional and an artist. Ryan has also been an editor and contributed essays for photographers such as Lee Friedlander, Christopher Payne, Seydou Keita, Paolo Pellegrin, and the list is long. And she has been awarded with the Dr. Erich Salomon Prize from the German Photographic Society in 2027. Among her other awards she has received is the Vision Award at the Center for Photography at Woodstock in 2015, and of course in also the Photo Editor of the Year by the Lucy Awards and Visa pour la Image Festival recently. She was also nominated by the international. She was also nominated by the International Center of Photography as its Spotlight honoree in 2024. So today she will introduce her to the work through a performative lecture presentation, and we are looking very much forward to it. And Kathy, thank you so much for being here with us. The stage is yours. Thank you.
Natasha, thank you so much for that introduction. And thank you, Mark. I so appreciate being here. And Anne for our discussion yesterday, and Santiago. I'm very, very grateful and honored to be here. And we had Scott Thody, my husband, came also, and we had a terrific class yesterday, Natasha's class, and so thank you to the students. It was a great conversation, and it was our first time, me and Scott together, critiquing work, so it went well. We've been married 40 years, and yet we didn't know how that would go, so thank you for that. It was terrific. I decided for this evening to show a couple pictures that were published in the New York Times Magazine that I produced when I was there, with an eye toward talking about why these pictures are good, what it was that made them good. So we're going to start out with, when I first got to the Times Magazine, the first time give me 1 second just to catch my breath and just think for a second. The first big assignment I was given was to do a special issue on Times Square, a photo issue. It was a big deal. I was extremely nervous. I had never been put in charge of a photo issue. So we're starting at the beginning here, and it's not it's the best subject of all, right? Times Square, photographers are drawn to it like bees to honey. But it's been photographed a lot. So I knew right away the challenge was, in each and every case, to make pictures that somehow went beyond what we'd seen before. One of the things that we needed to photograph, of course, was the signage, all of the signage and the marquees. They've been photographed a million times, so clearly, you can't make a straight documentary picture. I say this because one of the things over the years of my career that I've became to realize, one of the best things I can share with you is great photos are often almost always and often an interpretation, some kind of transformation of what you see. So I knew we'd need to take this material, these signs, and somehow have somebody with a vision who could transform it. And that led me to the thought of Abelardo Morel. As some of you probably know, Abe Morel had been doing at that time a series of camera obscura photos. And what I loved about it in trying to solve this very contemporary problem, how to make an original picture of the signage, I thought, you know what? I'm going to call Abe and go all the way back to this pre-photographic technique as old as the Renaissance. And the technique, of course, is you make a tiny aperture in the window. You cover up, you have a small hole, and in the old days it might have been into a cave. And the outdoors becomes projected against the wall, upside down. I called Abe, I didn't know him. He was a major artist who hadn't worked for magazines. He immediately took to the assignment. He said he'd actually been thinking of making that picture. Actually, I should back up. What I had proposed to Abe was to make the picture from a hotel room. And a hotel room, as we know, is always an evocative space. And we'll get to that again a little bit further. We immediately started scouting to find the right hotel room. Here you see, it's just these are the scouting pictures, not Abe's pictures, of course. It's a hotel room in the Marriott Marquis. Here you can see through the window some of the signs. This is going back to 1997. Was when we did this. It was right when Times Square was on the line of going. It was extremely known for being seedy. You know, it had the porn palaces. It wasn't a family-friendly place, but Disney had converted the New Amsterdam Theater, and it was on the cusp of change from being this seedy place to the opposite, a very touristy, friendly place. And that's another thing I wanted to mention for all the photographers here. When places are in the crux of transformation, influx is always a good thing for photography. Always. You can do something special. So then we basically decided on that room, and we set it up. Abe went, he made the exposure. So of course what he had to do there, and I'll tell you what, I'm going to show you the picture first, and then I'll tell you how he did it. I'll back again to tell you, I was very nervous because, again, first time in charge of an issue, and Abe's picture was the first one to come in. This is pre-digital, of course, which meant it was coming in as either a print, a negative, or a slide. In this case, the envelope arrived, and it was a print, I think it was 11 by 14, about this big. I opened the envelope, I took it out, and I literally started to cry. And I thought, my God, it's a picture for the ages. And I thought in that moment, Weekly Magazine, no matter what else happened with the issue, we had a picture that would stand the test of time, thanks to Abe. And basically what was amazing was he took a place, right, that thousands of people went through, in that the exposure took 2 days. And in the 2 days that he had the aperture open in the window, thousands of people went through, and not one of them was still long enough to see them. And yet, so we have a picture about movement and people and signage, all there, and it's a quiet, lonely, silent picture. So he transformed the space for us. And then, just going back to the history, the first mention of camera obscura is by a Chinese philosopher of the 5th century BC, and the second known mention is by Aristotle. So I love that in 1997, in the middle of Times Square, photographed a zillion times, that there was a way to look back, all the way back, pre-photo history, to make a picture that would feel different from what we knew. And in one of Abe's books, he actually has a quote when he was talking about his work where he quotes Leonardo da Vinci on the camera obscura. Who would believe that so small a space could contain the image of all the universe? Oh, mighty process. And then Abe himself also spoke about just how odd it was that 2 million, he said in 2 days, millions of people went by, I don't know, and no one stood still long enough to be seen. And he said it was like a perverse picture. So why is this picture so good? I think looking back, it's because it was a unique interpretation. And thanks to Abelardo Morel's vision and artistry, he took this well-known, cliche, over-photographed subject, the signs, the marquees, and he was able to bring mystery and romance and emotion to that scene, and it wasn't a straightforward image at all. So I think the backstory here is reinventing the familiar. Next, in this issue, I had assigned 19 photographers across the spectrum, from fine artists, who again didn't usually work on magazine commissions, to pure documentarians, to conceptual artists. There were a number of artists. I'm not going to show you, I'm just showing you 3 pictures from the issue because we're going to go on to other things, but it was wonderful. Nan Golden had work, and so many good people. Thomas Demand, people all did very different interpretations. My favorite picture, and it's a picture that I have actually hanging by my desk at home. Oh, there's Abe's picture again, the layout, is by Lars Thunborg. Lars was a Swedish photographer who, I thought in doing this, it would be great to bring in an outsider's eyes. So very specifically, in addition to all the New Yorkers who were on assignment, had Lars come in to do something, thinking he would see it in the way you see a place when you go for the first time. And Lars is known for his social documentary work, but with a real twist to it, that vivid color, primary colors, and a lot of tone, attitude, commentary, almost a little satire, but there was a lot of pathos in his work and wit. So he had an eye. It was always about people and humanity. And what was amazing to me, so I gave him free range. So there wasn't a specific idea or subject. It was more like walk the streets and what do you see? And this was the picture Lars made. As you look at this picture, I want you to know there is nothing there that's photogenic. It was the corner of 42nd Street and 8th Avenue, and because Times Square was on the moment of massive change, all of those buildings that you're seeing had been condemned to be knocked down for the new stuff that was going to be built, which of course, as you know, happens in New York all the time. We don't have the kind of, I think, sometimes respect and admiration of the old, although there was nothing there probably, it was really worth saving. And because they were going to be knocking it down, they painted the plywood of the boarded up buildings that were about to be demolished. I love this picture because it was crazy. It's chaotic. It's completely out of control. There's nothing in that picture today that exists. So nothing you see there. That's also the great gift of photography. Every time, as soon as you make the picture, you've made a document of something that doesn't exist, whether the person won't be walking by or the scene won't exist. And I still, to this day, think in the end that that's one of the things that makes it uniquely powerful art form. And the craziness of this scene was also something that got to me. And when I saw it, I thought, oh my God, it's Mondrian. Like, how did Lars take that scene and somehow organize it and wrestle it into submission in the way that, let's say, Mondrian was attacking a canvas where he was in total control? And years later, and we also think of Lars Thunbach, again, is thought of more as a philosophical, sociological photographer dealing with people and humanity, and yet he was an extraordinary formalist also. And so I had and he saw the world in primary colors, even in his own personal work. And this, of course, is Mondrian's composition with red, black, blue, yellow, and gray. And when I asked Lars about it, Mondrian, did you think of that? And he said, yes, of course I did. And I love that because we're going to get to this in this talk also. You have to feed the mind. You have to all the time just fill it with the pictures that you're looking at, because it all ends up informing you when there's a grace note in front of you. You'll see it, and you'll see it through your own eyes, but your eyes will have been nourished by the best. And I loved, when you take a look at it, again, similar to Abe Morell's picture, it looks empty, but there are 3 people in that frame. And the other thing that and then here you see the layout. I'm not showing many layouts. I know it's a design school, and you've had the great pleasure of hearing from Gail Bickler and Matt Willey in the past and other great designers. Here we're leaning into the photography, but I just want to emphasize, of course, everything you see is deeply collaborative. It starts with an idea in the ideas meeting, and that can be an idea from the editor of the magazine, a story editor, a writer, a photo editor, a designer, a photographer who we're pitching on the behalf of a pitch they've sent us. So I just want to emphasize that it's the most collaborative art form I can imagine, and that's evident in everything that you're seeing here, the photographer being, of course, the primary creative. So then, Lars made this picture early on a Sunday morning. And that made me think of Edward Hopper's famous painting that hangs in the Whitney in New York that a lot of people have a place in their heart for, that's titled Early Sunday Morning. So what I love is this painter who was also looking at light, form, rectangles, and when you look at Lars's picture, I only, after all the years I've looked at it, because I keep it by my desk at home now, noticed there are about 50 rectangles in that image. So I just want to mention that because it took me a long time to even see that, and yet he brings harmony to that enormity of the amount of rectangles in the same way Hopper was doing something similar. And then I think another connection between those 2 men's work is the fact that there's something moody and kind of soulful in Hopper's work, and it feels kind of alienated often, and obviously Lars's work has something similar in that lonely street corner. So the backstory here on this one is the importance of looking to art history, and really, in this case, it was painting, again, to nourish the mind because of the fact that when you need it, and you need the angels to tap you on the shoulder, and you need some kind of subliminal influence or something to draw on as you're looking at a crazy, chaotic scene in life, how wonderful to see that, because it's something you saw, and maybe it was something you saw when you were a kid in the museum here, will feed it. And another thing I wanted to mention, I'll mention again, is that my brother, who's a science guy, told me this once, that there's a famous saying that Louis Pasteur said, In the fields of observation, chance favors only the prepared mind. There's one more picture from the Times Square issue I wanted to show, and it's by Larry Tao. And Larry Tao we also brought in from Canada, pure documentarian, black and white, 35 millimeter, roaming around, documenting what he witnesses. And we sent him to the Port Authority bus terminal. As many of you may know, it was and it still is a kind of, the good thing is a ton of buses go through and moves people from here to there, but it's decrepit. It's awful looking, and it's not a beautifully designed space at all. And while he was documenting Port Authority, and that was about transit and passengers, he saw the room where the police take detainees. So if they've made an arrest, maybe somebody, a pickpocket, they would take them to this room and they would be manacled to the bench. And there were two things about this photo that make it extraordinary. One, I'll tell you the practical one. The detainees didn't want to be photographed, and of course Lars respected that, and he figured out a way to make a picture without showing them. The other thing that I think is amazing was he made a picture of absence. And how did he get that picture of absence? Was he kept his eyes open. And Robert Frank, years ago, when he was asked, what advice would you give to young photographers? His words were, keep your eyes open. And I love that when Larry Tao went in there, and here's the layout on that, he saw those shadows far more powerful than if you had seen the specific detainees, the shadows left by the years of people's grime or whatever from leaning against the wall. So this picture to me has been an astounding one. The other thing I'll mention, and this is something I lean into a lot in my own work that we'll get to later, is I think a lot of art is a drive toward abstraction, and we usually, of course, connect that with painting. But it's important for photography also. So specificity, of course, is important. The more specific the picture, the more detail, often that's exactly what you want. But there's other times when you want to step back and anonymize and somehow make something that's more emblematic, that gets to the essence of what you're saying without getting down to the actual, this is the actuality of it. So those three were from the Times Square issue. We're going to now fast forward a bit to, we had a story, this a couple years later, we had a story coming up in the very beginning of 2020. And the story was going to be on a revival. This is now a culture story. A revival on Broadway of West Side Story, the great play, the theater play West Side Story. And I was able to get the access for us to bring all of the dancers, the cast members. There were 33 dancers for this show, all of whom it was going to be their first time on Broadway. So it was a huge thing in their lives. They came into the studio on a Sunday morning, and I assigned Philip Montgomery. So imagine the studio. It was a huge studio because we knew he'd be making pictures of the dances. And it was a big sound, not a sound studio, but the next closest thing in size. And it was set up with the big stage-like area, beautifully lit for all the scenes. We had the director of the show and the choreographer there to direct these 33 young dancers. And all the plans were put in place. And Philip is one of the rare birds who he is mainly a documentary photographer and does extraordinary work. I'm sure some of you know it. He has a show in Germany right now, and the state of America. And but he's also very good in the studio, which I kind of tapped into early because one of the things I felt was very important from a photo editing point of view was cross-assigning. So right from the start, I just loved the idea of taking someone who did this and giving them an assignment that gave them a chance to do this, because it often opens a door in a creative person and something great happens, especially even if it's that first time out when they're doing something. It's riskier for sure, but I also think it was lucky that I was at a weekly magazine, 52 issues a year. What does that mean? If it's memorable and you do something special, they'll remember it. If it's not memorable, the next one's coming off the presses. So, okay, you have to take risks. It's not as if you're, I shouldn't say this, but like, you know, if you're curating for a museum show, you're making a couple different bets for any given year, 2 years, and you're with it for a long time. So you have to really know, really be sure where you're going to land. With the weekly magazine, I felt part of it was take risks. And with photographers doing their work, take the risks, because often the best stuff comes out of taking a risk. You're not sure if it's going to work, but if it works and you saw something, in my case as an editor assigning photographers, making a match that you thought might work, and in Philip's case, he figured out and works with a terrific lighting person, and he knew what he wanted to do. We're there that morning, beautiful pictures of the cast, very controlled, choreographed, almost like film stills, but not easy to do. And you had the scenes, and I'm only showing you a slice. There were a whole bunch of pictures. I'm just showing you 2 or 3. This is, you know, it's a story of gangs in New York. It was decades ago, and it's the Sharks and the Jets, the 2 opposing gangs, and the beautiful young dancers. And one of our, there was a great moment before they first started doing one of the scenes with the gang members. The guys got down on the floor and started doing push-ups, and I remember we had such a laugh. Gail Bickler was there that morning too with me, and we just were like, "What's going on? What's going on?" We realized they just wanted to look pumped for the picture, which was cool. And then, but here's the thing. Wonderful picture, beautiful, everything we needed. Then, this picture. How in the world do you think Philip Montgomery made this out of control picture within all of that kind of control? It's an impossible picture, right? You couldn't art direct this. Nobody. You couldn't choreograph this and say, you're here, you're there. You couldn't art direct it. What he had done was he had taken outside the main studio, and he had taken a little corner, and he put down a little black piece of fabric and a very small black backdrop. And at one point in a break in the action, in a break in the shooting of the specific shots, he turned to a couple of the dancers and he said to them, "Hey, you guys want to just go mess around on that?" So these wonderful, they were pumped up, excited. It was going to be their first time on Broadway. It was just, the energy was pulsing in this place. It was off the charts. And they went over there and they just started tumbling on top of each other, having a ball. And it wasn't the choreography, it was the spirit of it probably. And the reason he did it was Philip wanted to enforce chaos. So I asked him about it later. And he was so interesting, and I'm going to quote him directly on this. And he said, "I had this specific shot set up, specific good, but felt enforced. But by hanging this black curtain, very disheveled, that seemed like an afterthought," he said, "as soon as people moved into that space and I wasn't tethered and controlled, I could really just go crazy and approach it in the way I've done most of my career, in a documentary context." So he took his documentary brain and he brought it into that studio that day, where by definition studio work is usually, as you know, much more controlled. And he had foreseen that the chaos of the production, 33 young people who were excited about this role, would ensue, and he wanted to take advantage of it. And what I thought was amazing was he said it wasn't me saying, move your arm here and there. It was me letting talent do what talent does. And they came up with this on their own. And he said, of course, I dealt the light. And we're going to get back to the light with Philip's work in a few minutes. And it wasn't choreography part of the show, as I said. But he then said that as soon as I'm not in control, things seem to work better for me. And I get impatient in the studio because of the orderly way people do things. I wanted to build out a space so I could go rogue in there. And that's what he did. All that control, all the prep, he did that, but he built a little space to go rogue. And that's another lesson I've learned over the years. Go in fully prepared, and as Pastor said, chance favors only the prepared mind, but be ready for chance to kick in and the serendipity, right? And then basically, there's another thing I wanted to show you here that gets back to art history. As we're watching the dancers tumble around, I said to Philip, oh my God, it's Raft of the Medusa by Jerry Coe. And I go to my phone, I'm watching this, it's not possible, right? Look at this, and then it's crazy. And look to the lower left of Raft of the Medusa. It was while this was happening in real time, just serendipitously, that's what I thought of. And then Philip said to me, no, he said, I thought of Laocoon and his sons, the Greek sculpture. And apparently I hadn't seen, as they're tumbling around, he had taken out his phone, remember it's all kind of chaotic, and he showed it to one of the dancers and said, hey, look at this. So I love that these kind of, again, fill the mind, and then this wonderful stuff is speaking to you. And then you're gonna see a very short clip, a wonderful video. This morning in the studio was so terrific. I did something I really never do. I called Scott, and we were downtown Manhattan. I called Scott, my husband, and Sylvia, our daughter, who was home at that point. She's, at that point, 22 years old, maybe. And said, you guys have to come and watch this shoot today. So then, as they're tumbling around, she filmed this.
So y'all been touching each other.
In the house.
Oh yeah, thank you.
It's wonderful, right? Like you could never have foreseen it, predicted it, but he built in that little moment for it to happen in the midst of the controlled shoot. And I don't even know if you say, I always felt really good that Jake Silverstein, the editor of the magazine at the time, showed me he got an email from David Remnick, the editor-in-chief of the New Yorker, and said something like, wow, of this cover. So I'm just sharing that. We got a cover for the ages. Now, early 2020, that shoot was in the end of February 2020. So you know where I'm headed with this, right? The issue with the West Side Story cover was published on early January, January 26th. The show opened on February 20th, West Side Story. It closed on March 11th, the night before the theaters shut down in New York City due to the coronavirus epidemic. I assigned Philip Montgomery to document the crisis, and oh, sorry, I should move beyond this, sorry. And what was happening in the hospitals. We put in an intense effort, remember it's a big group effort, to get into the hospitals, and one of the photo editors, Shannon Simon, got us permission to get into 9 of the 11 public hospitals in New York. We were working very rapidly. This is all at the same moment that we and everyone were going home for the next year. None of us knew that then, but suddenly we were going to be putting out the magazine remotely, and it was intense at the same moment the virus as it was hitting here, particularly in these areas in Europe as well as New York City, we were dealing with that. So we got him into the hospitals, and on his first day of shooting, 1,162 patients had been hospitalized with the virus in New York, and 349 had died. By April 6th, his last day, 19,177 people had been hospitalized, and 3,202 had died. So none of us, this was something that, of course, all of us in this room had not been hit with something, and we weren't prepared for the magnitude of that crisis. But we did know it was urgent to show how desperate the situation was, and part of that was trying to convince people how important it was to stay home and wear the masks. Remember, it was a big hoo-ha in the US, people didn't want to wear the mask, all that nonsense. But we knew how important it was that people understand, and that was a big part of wanting him there. So the story here is going to be about, I brought it back up again to mention the design. Here you see the decision on the part of Gail and the design team was to be very simple. This one was going to be about the photos. And it's the only time I'm going to show you all the spreads from the story, because when it involves photojournalism, the sequencing is so important. But because we're going to cover a couple different, we're covering a lot of years here and a couple different photos, I can't show the rest. But this one, I'll show everything. This is going to be about light. So the hard thing with the hospitals was twofold. The light is terrible, it's flat, it's fluorescent. Philip had developed over the years, when he was out working in the field, a way of working with an off-camera strobe that was going to be a wonderful way in the hospitals to override that inherent light, but also, as you can see, to emphasize and heighten what was happening. This is just a picture of a healthcare worker tying their scrubs, and yet clearly it rises up. It's somebody headed into battle. There was another practical reality to him using that strobe for these scenes, and of course, that was about privacy. And you'll see as we go on, the HIPAA laws in New York, in the US, of course, and I'm sure you have something similar here, you can't show the identities of patients in hospitals without permission. Most of the patients were on ventilators. We couldn't ask their permission. And the parents, the family members, this was a very rare moment in history, were not allowed in the hospitals because the COVID was so contagious. So you couldn't ask their permission. So Philip had to do this entire story that would normally depend upon seeing the expressions of the main people, the sick or the family members, without revealing them. And of course, the expressions of the healthcare workers were important. And his strobe emphasizes what you should see. Here's somebody literally getting the CPR and being brought back to life in that moment. So he's working under intense conditions, at risk to himself, because everybody in the hospitals was at risk. And he did remarkable work. And he, through his deft use of the strobe, he was able to make pictures that didn't reveal anything. And it's hard because when photographers like this are working, they do the best they can to make sure that the subjects are okay with being photographed. He quickly realized the doctors were okay, and the healthcare workers, the nurses, and everyone, because they wanted the people to see and know, wear your masks, stay home, so the numbers would start to go down. But then there were also moments like this. It's just a supply closet. And it's a powerful picture because of the lighting. Photography is almost always about light, and that's either natural light that's seen or the supplied or amplified light. And this is one of the best examples I could give you, and Philip is one of the best at working with the light, and again, under dire conditions. And then here, this was the role the photo editor, Shannon, had suggested that he do some of the blurred, like shutter, slowed down shutter speed stuff of the gurneys being rushed by. So that was just a neat suggestion. Not that he needed suggestions, but part of the dialogue back and forth between all of us. And here, the one thing he could work with everyone, remember, is covered in masks, so he can't. It's hard to get the faces that give you emotion, but he could work with the eyes and light the eyes. And then here, it was the final picture that we put into the spread, the series of layouts. And I just think it's a very beautiful picture, and you recognize, again, scenes that were familiar in some ways, but not that many people got in the hospitals for the obvious reasons. The whole time he was working in the hospitals, of course, what were we thinking in the photo department? We were sadly aware and knew we desperately wanted to get into a funeral home because so much of the story was about death. And one of the picture editors, Debbie Samuelson, was able to get access to a funeral home in the Bronx that was run by two brothers, the Ferenga brothers. And again, we had Philip continue on this story. And I will say, producing this kind of story while living the story was an unusual situation, and it did make it more difficult. I was acutely aware of that. One part of me was horrifying for all of us, the amount of people that were dying worldwide, and none of us knew this experience to that, like that, right? And then the work we had to do. On the other hand, and this is a personal thing to share with you, as you know, I left the Times after 39 years, and at that point it was what? It was year, I don't know, I can't do the math, 35 or 36. I do remember thinking how not happy, but grateful I was there because of the importance of this story. I just thought, oh my God, I'm here and I'm able to be part of this team telling the story. And I say that because there are people here in this room who will probably end up doing documentary work, and it is a privilege, and you are an important part of history, putting down those images. The tough one with the funeral home was how to convey the death. I'm going right to the cover here. So Philip was there working with the Frenger brothers. You'll see one or two more pictures, but he became close to a family in that week or a couple days, I don't remember exactly how long, the Purewall family, who the mother, the daughter, the father, the husband had died. The mother and daughter were okay with him being photographed. I think they felt it was all right to do that, again, to be part of telling the story. And here you see, obviously we all know the importance of the gloved hand. It's very hard to make a respectful picture of somebody in a coffin, and unusual with a bright light, but I don't know what you all see. I would be curious, but I felt Philip's light gave it a celestial quality, a spiritual quality. Here's a much more pure documentary. I mean, that was pure documentary also, sadly, but that's the chapel, and there was such an overflow of bodies. They were lined up on the chairs in the chapel. And then this was awful, and again, it was one of the morgue trucks. We could recognize them parked around the city, and it was the New York Times had very strict rules, ethics guidelines. We don't alter photos. So of course, that's a thing it was always important to the Times, and now with AI, it's even more equally and stringently important. But this picture was important, and one body bag, you could make out the name, and we decided we had to run it, so we removed the name, we retouched out the name, but we told the readers in the caption that we had done that, so that they knew it had been a slightly altered photo in one of the body bags. Now, the next picture. Oh my God, when I saw this picture, it's Sal Ferenga moving one of the caskets, one of the bodies, through the weather stripping. We don't know if he's going in, is he going out, but what's incredible about it, why is this picture so good? This is the one in this series that I think is the best picture of all. And why does it resonate? It's simplicity, it's starkness, but it becomes something else. It's starkly real, but it's also metaphorical. It's like a depiction of moving from this world to the next. So the plastic, greasy weather stripping that separated the funeral home from, I guess, where the coffins came in, becomes almost like a portal, right? And I couldn't help but think that it made me think of, God, it's like the ferryman in the Greek myth, right? It's the river Styx. It's going from there to here. And I think it's the one that, of everything he did, most stands that test of time. And yet, it's about pure observation, Sal has the cigarette hanging out of his mouth. He's got the bandana. Nothing's art directed. Philip just saw it, but his mind that's fed again with poetry and imagery somehow saw that symbolic, metaphorical resonance. And I like here, it makes me think of something I once read that Jeff Rosenheim, the curator of photography at the Metropolitan in New York, said that a great photograph has to say different things. We're going to go on to the next, and it's very different. Now we're going to switch entirely to a culture story, Jack Davison. And many, many times in my career, we would photograph actors. We did the great performers for many years. I had the great fun of we would photograph approximately 20, 25 actors who were considered the best actors of that year leading up to the Oscars. And sometimes we did a cover story on an individual. We had a story coming up on Cate Blanchett. I was very excited because, you know, Cate Blanchett's an adventurous actress. We would be able to have fun with her. The odds are she would be up for doing something special, not just sitting for a portrait. So I reached out to Jack. He was thrilled to photograph Cate Blanchett. And he immediately thought, you know what? She's a shapeshifter. She is the kind of actress that will do play all sorts of roles, and she could do it in a couple hours in a studio. He put together a pitch for how he saw it and mood boards. Jack Davison makes the most beautiful mood boards, and again, this is all, they're an art history lesson unto themselves. They basically, he combines his drawings, he combines photos, he combines paintings, and one time I asked him, when did you start these? He started when he was 13. Gathering images, and again, with the joy of the iPhone, as soon as you see something you're reading about an artist, you can just add it to your stash so that, again, it's not that you're copying anything at all, you're just feeding your mind. So he spent a lot of time looking at pictures of her and sort of thinking about it, and we didn't want it to be just a celebrity shoot. We wanted to take advantage of her creativity, because when you put together a wildly creative actor with a wildly creative photographer, you have a chance to make magic. And what he said when I spoke to him was, I really love the way Cate plays with her form and characterizations, fluctuating through a myriad of forms. I would love to visually explore the idea of the shifting presence, conjuring an image of Cate as a Bauhaus chameleon, her outfits made to feel as if they're part of a kaleidoscope of colors and fractured shapes. We'd use a mix of set projection and mirrors to play with light and form, stretching and elongating limbs, and playing with the iconography of a star shifting and reforming. Jack had always shot black and white for us prior to that, so I thought it was pretty amazing. He had done a number of magnificent black and white assignments, but he switched to color. I'm only showing you a handful of the mood boards he sent. He put together a whole bunch of stuff which started to give us a feel for what he was going to do. There's even more than this. And here are his drawings. He does beautiful drawings of what he's thinking of for a shoot like this, where with the actress, and here again, Cate was going to be on board for doing everything. So he made these wonderful sketches, he sent those, and take a look, for example, you'll see, the second from the left, the one with the projection of shapes on the face. Or maybe is it the first one there? The first one with the projection of color ovals on the face. Keep your eye out for that one when it comes to life. Here you see some BTS. I wasn't lucky enough to be at this shoot. It was in London, and they're building the sets. He has a terrific team, again, deeply collaborative. Keep your eye out for this one where you're going to see her head come above a tabletop. Cate fully embraced the idea. She was fearless on set, so she wore the different costumes that he had planned. I'm now going to show you, I think it's 8 pictures, and maybe it's 8 or 9 pictures. I want you to look at them and think about which one you would choose for the cover. So you're about to see 8 or 9. So make a mental note of which one you choose for the cover, and we're going to go back and do a vote. So here you see the beautiful blur, such a rich imagination. There's the black and white. There's a wonderful one with a gorgeous palette. Another one with the sculptural costumes that were built out. The projector brought to life. Another kind of blurred, and again, this is just a handful of the pictures he made that day. And then here, that's the one which you could see, they were setting up the table for her head to rise above the table. What I love about Jack is he's got, I don't know, what I think of as that mischievous sensibility of the surrealists, right? He's definitely all the time living in that Man Ray, kind of Picasso, all of the sort of surreal painters of the past. And for him, he never takes a face, or not never, I don't mean that at all. When he decides to do an actress or an actor and take them to a whole other level, he doesn't just take the face at face value. He'll twist it, he'll obscure it. His shoots, he'll bring, 10 different bottles and vases and modeled things, and he'll have all sorts of things that he can hold in front of the face to distort it. And I've just learned a lot. I share that with you because if you bring some stuff just to even play with, to distort reality a little bit, you're going to get somewhere. And we're going to go backwards now. There's the grid of what you saw. So as I go backwards, I would love, it's going to be a little hard to see a show of hands, but I'd love to see a show of hands of which one you would, and if you saw the cover, don't say anything. And then we'll go back and I'll show you which one we chose. How many for this one on the cover? All right, we got a bunch, especially down in the front here. Okay, how many on this one? All right, we've got some, okay, we got quite a few there. All right, this is interesting, all right. Fewer on this, okay, some in the back on that. Fewer on this, and you guys are right, because they're a little bit, they're beautiful, but a little bit harder to see, I know. The graphics, it was the hardest decision, so graphically beautiful. How many for this one? We've got some, this one's definitely getting a healthy show, okay. Show of hands. This one, I listen, this is also a beauty. Okay, fewer on this multiple exposure. And then, this was the hardest cover of all. There was quite a mix here. Sometimes the cover, you can pick it immediately, right? It's one and it's obvious. In this case, we had so many choices. I'm going to show you which one we did. Hold on. Wait, hold on one second. I gotta go back. Give me 1 second. We're going to go forward now. And then this is the one we chose, which I loved. But the next biggest show, we had a big show of hands there, but you guys were really heavy on the black and white with the cone head. But that was the other one that I think was a real toss-up for us, which way to go. But what a good place to be, to have so many choices. So then we're going to switch gears now. I'm going to talk about my work, the office romance work I did. So as some of you may know or not, I had the great gift of working in a building designed by Renzo. My first decades at the Times Magazine, I was in the old building, which was great in a kind of grubby, gritty, journalistic, almost kind of decrepit way. It was not modern at all. It was kind of a mess, but it was authentic. It felt great. I loved it. We got to the New York Times, the new building that Renzo had just built for the Times, and I didn't feel it at first. It's too corporate. And believe me, I know that sounds like heresy. I mean, he's brilliant, but I was used to the old mess and it felt corporate. And then after a year or so, I don't remember exactly how long, I suddenly one day saw it. It was literally like an awakening. The building, I have to describe the building to you before I start to show the photos. The building is all glass, and it's clear glass, highly unusual today. All skyscrapers are built, at least in New York, with sunglasses, to use Renzo Piano's word. They have to be grayed down, or they get that green glass to control the amount of heat and light for all the right reasons, environmental reasons. He didn't want to do it, and he came up with this unique decision, I shouldn't say unique, there's a history of it also, as we were just talking about all the art history that speaks to the photography today. But he came up with the idea of horizontal white ceramic rods. So the whole building is wreathed in horizontal white ceramic rods. I one day saw a zigzag of light on the stairs, and the stairs were along a window wall, which is also typical of Renzo Piano's work. And I saw it, and my heart started beating faster. And then from that moment on, I could see it all the time, the extraordinary beauty. I started making pictures. Thank goodness there's a phone, a camera in all of our pockets. I took out the iPhone, I started making pictures. And I made zillions of them, and I'm just showing a handful today. This is one of the earliest, and it was one morning at 9-something. I was lucky enough to be on the east side of the building, so the building on a sunny day was powered with hot, morning, eastern light. And Manhattan, kind of like, I mean, okay, you have Mediterranean light, you've got the best. But Manhattan has beautiful light that bounces off the two rivers, the Hudson and the East River. And the light was coming in, and I see, this is Edward Barsamian, one of the style editors. I'm like, Edward, can you come stand in this light? You know, I happened to be wearing his striped pajamas that day. How could I resist, right? And it was just fabulous. I can't tell you. This was the person in charge of production on the magazine. And she was standing there. And I just thought, oh my God. And you see the Pantone chair. Thank goodness for the Pantone chairs. We had beautiful things. And often the rule of thirds would happen naturally just because of those windows, and sometimes the shades came down, and the shades came down according to the light. They were keyed to respond to it, but I found out where the secret switches were, so I could override them whenever I needed to. And then it was a thing where, I don't know, this was one of the photo editors one morning, and it just was so beautiful. So you might ask yourselves, how did I do that in the midst of a hectic, frenetic job? A weekly magazine, we were like this, pedal to the metal all the time. There was, lunch was at your desk. It was in, crazy in all the best way. But I don't know, I would just see it. The muses would call, and I missed many pictures, but when I had the opportunity, I just had to respond. So, and sometimes it was fast, like, this is when Christine Walsh, the photo editor, was wearing a skirt that was casting that light. I was like, could you stand here? This was right by my cubicle, my desk, by that window, that east-facing window wall. And it was a quick engagement. Or I'd go up into the cafeteria, and this I could not get over. This person was just sitting there, and I just thought, oh my God, that was the photo gods. That was the photo gods speaking to me. And then years later, and I only say it because this is design and engineering and architecture place, I assumed those beautiful cutout circles in the vertical beams on the window wall were for aesthetics. No, I found out one time I happened to be photographing an architect who had written something for the magazine, and he was explaining to me that the skyscrapers weigh so much they have to find places to remove some of the weight. And those circles in the cafeteria, that was the big cafeteria space on the 14th floor, were cut out for that reason. So I love that the aesthetic of it was also very, very functional. Come on, this is New York City. This is as good as it gets. And this was, I even double-checked for this talk. I wanted to tell you that this is why I also love the iPhone. I wanted to tell you the exact time I made that picture. That was 6:15 p.m. on May 30th, 2018. Another gift, just everybody, don't take it for granted. In the old days, you couldn't have had the date and time on every single picture you made. It wouldn't have been possible. And I just love that you can do it. This is looking down on 41st Street. And at 6:15, I headed downstairs. I was probably headed to leave at the end of the day, and walked over to that window and thought, oh, something good is happening here with the light, and hung around there for a bit. I do kind of remember that. And then Instagram was also part of my becoming a photographer. So, I was always a photo editor. I was an artist and majored in art in school, but I was a painter, and then left that to get into photography editing. But a big part of me deciding to make the pictures was the lure of Instagram. It was fun. I would make the picture and post it, and all my friends would put likes on it. Like, it literally, we used to laugh. Like, we started in the office when it was really young, and it was thrilling. 10 people were following you, and it was fun. One other thing I wanted to tell you about this was the comments when I put this up will also, again, speak to you of what the collective consciousness we all have in our brains sees. These were some of the quotes, and I went back last week to reread them years later because I remember there was a whole bunch I wanted to share them. I was curious. This is what people saw in the pictures. It's just a handful. Reminds me of a Sam Fuller film. For some reason, this reminds me of 1984. You need to write a story to go with this picture. You just made Fritz Lang's day. Has an Orson Welles feel. I was like, yes, that was the one that I thought of. but somebody had put it, looks like a scene from Metropolis. And then somebody put stunning shot of the decisive moment. And yes, it was decisive because the moment the guy came. So anyway, just a way, what I love about it, okay, not everybody's in a building designed by Renzo Piano, this kind of light, but you know, I saw it, and a lot of people didn't see it. And also, I went into it organically, but the thing I wanted to share is, how many people here have a picture of their parents at work? Anybody? See, this upsets me. People don't have a picture of their parents at work. We spend most of our lives, many of us, at work. And I was aware at a certain point that I was making, they're documents, although I'm clearly having theatrical play with them, with the light. It looks so film noir. That's from day one. It was always also about, oh, this is so noirish. But I knew that these would at least have relevance for someone at some point of a moment in time in their lives that they could share with their kids. So then here, this is a picture, end of the day, 6:45 going home, looking out on the west side. So the light on the west side and east side was always different. I became very familiar with it. This was my assistant, Karen Hanley, for a number of years. And I just love, this will exist. You know, and even last week or 2 weeks ago, I haven't seen her now in a couple of years, she texted me to say she just gave birth to her first child. So I just love this picture made in, I have the date and time for you guys, 10:47 a.m., March 3rd, 2017. You know, just neat that exists for her. And of course, here there's a play of stripes. You're probably wondering, I had been working with the hard edge stripes for so long, and I loved them, that, you know, you do have to mix it up as a photographer. If you fall in love with something, you want to play with it. So I started holding up just glass scenes. Like I always held myself to a discipline of just what you could find on the desk in the office. And I would pick up glass scenes and shake them against the light so that the bars would dance and wiggle, so I could make the bars softer just to do something different. And then I went in, I got so addicted, I went in every weekend, if it was sunny, to make pictures. So the still lives were made on the weekend. It was me roaming around the building by myself, other than the people in the newsroom. And I would just play to my heart's content. And there you have the little thumbtack things, and the light was incredibly strong. That one's 9:47 a.m. in November. I was just drunk in love with that light. And then this was taking, Matt Willey had designed that year the American Photography Annual Book. Each year they would have a different designer. And he had put a wrapped cover with cutout polka dots on it. And I took the cover and I played with that for a couple hours just to have something for the light to come through. Sometimes I would take a chair and tip it over. So these were ones where it was just me alone playing with something. And then this is just tape. And it was playing with the tape, and then it clearly became about the light becoming a kind of spectral figure. And this one was taking staples and making them into buildings. And I know your building is called, what is it called? The stapler. Yes, Grappador. So I love that I made the staples into buildings. I'm in the building that is a stapler. But that's the magic of photography, right? That those little tiny staples, I worked them hard enough that they became something else. And then the next one is again 41st Street, another moment of just looking down and seeing that beauty. There's so much theater in New York, and there was so much theater in that building. It was very cinematic. I could daydream all the time, like if I could make a film here, and that would be a different life. And then here's Gail Bickler, who some of you heard speak when she spoke, and we had the great pleasure of working together a number of years. And we were up on the roof. I had become tight with the man in charge of running the physical building, because there were other people besides the Times, even though it's the New York Times building, the other renters on other floors. And if I needed to get up to the roof, he would let me up to the roof. So we had Gail up there, and she told me years later she's really afraid of heights, but she agreed to go to the edge. And that was just, again, having fun. And then this was another one on the weekend, 8:44 a.m. on a Sunday. And what I love here is, okay, you got the double cliche happening. You have the globe and the Empire State Building. I'm never afraid of cliches, and you know why? We had been in a meeting years ago with Adam Moss, the brilliant editor, former editor of the magazine, who then went on to New York Magazine. And we were in an ideas meeting brainstorming a concept for a cover. We meaning me and the art director and photo team, whatever. And we were brainstorming some idea. I don't remember what the subject was. And somebody, I remember vividly in the meeting, said, "Oh, that's a cliche." And Adam said, "They're cliches for a reason, because they work." And I loved it. That is so freeing, and I say that particularly to the students here. If the cliche bell goes off in your head, don't run away, reinvent it. And the best example I can give you, the skull. The skull, Shakespeare, Picasso, artist after artist painted it. Basquiat reinvented it. Like, just don't ever, or there's incredible pictures by Mapplethorpe, like holding it, just, and Dwayne Michaels, don't be afraid of a cliche, because they are cliches for a reason. There's a resonance, and it's just what you do with it. So I was, again, you're the judge of whether it's a good photo, but I thought it was one of my better photos. And that one got a bunch of, when I looked up for this talk, I was looking back at the comments on that, and there were comments like, "Where is Kent?" is what I'd like to know. So where's Clark Kent? The Daily Planet. So everybody saw Clark Kent and Superman and that. Anyway. And then at a certain point, Jake Silverstein, the editor-in-chief of the magazine, and for me in my final years there, and still, he and Gail were doing a redesign of the magazine and redesigning the contributors page, and he pulled me aside. He knew I had been doing these office romance photos. That was all just a guilty pleasure. And he said, "We'd like you to photograph all the contributors," meaning writers who are writing in that issue, illustrators, photographers, et cetera. And I was like, "Jake, that's crazy." Like, there's a whole other thing when you're doing it just as a fun versus on assignment on a weekly basis, when you have to have strong sunlight, which was the most complicating factor, because I found myself all the time setting up shoots, and then I'd always say to the subject, "If it's not sunny that morning, we're going to need to reschedule." So anyway, but it was worth it, and I said yes to doing it. And the reason why was it gave me a chance to photograph interesting people, and it made it more legit in the sense of time to go. Okay, we're going to zip ahead. I got 10 minutes. I'm almost there. Then we have another one of the contributor photos. This is the writer for the contributor page, the op-ed page of the Times. And she told me, "You made me look cool. I never looked cool in my life," which I love. She's a brilliant writer. Hiroshi Sugimoto. The takeaway here is, I said to him, "Do you have anything you could bring that you could hold? That's great advice if you're going to be a portraitist. You can hold, then people have to use their hands." And he said, "Yeah, I have these glasses." And he took them out. And I said, "Oh my God, they're amazing." He said, "I designed them." But if you don't ask, he wouldn't have volunteered it probably. And then Matt Willey, on his last day, I said, "Matt, can I photograph you? Let's go do it." And we had great light that day. And then this was a very real, bizarre picture that they were emptying out a floor. I don't know what they were doing. That was pure documentary. And then this was also just a witnessed moment. And I like on that one, I hadn't thought of it till later. I saw a wave, but like Hokusai's wave. I hadn't like really thought of that. This is a weird one, and this is the second to last one I'm showing, or third to last. Towards the end of the pandemic, the editor of the opinion pages called and said, "Would you be willing to go into the building while it's still empty and make some of your office romance pictures for the op-ed?" So I said, yes, of course, and I took a week's vacation to go to the New York Times building, just so that I could wander around and take the pictures. It was bizarre, it was eerie, it wasn't fun. It was fun, it was from an art creator, but it was different. Without the people, it was ghostly. It was disturbing. I could feel the emptiness. The whole thing was weird. It was just different. Even though I was often there on the weekends without people when there was in full swing, but this time it's different. I walked in the building that morning and I said to there were a couple workmen working in the building, like carpenters and all. And I said, "Is there anything interesting happening in the building?" And he said, "Well, if you go to floor such and such, they're turning over that floor for new clients or a different department or something." I stepped off the elevator and I turned the corner and I saw this. And I was just literally, thank you, photo gods. Like, what are the odds that you'd have all clearly the symbolism, the clocks, but again, one clock, you're already wrestling with the cliche. A pile of clocks, you have something else going on. And I wanted so much to make I don't know if I should tell you this, but I will. Okay. I wanted to make a really good picture, so I worked it for over a long, long time. And I sat in a cubicle and I made them, and I stood here, I went and I got a chair and I stood on it, I didn't want to mess up that picture. And I was really feeling like just full of myself, a young artist, and I'm doing this, and, I'm doing this thing, and I was feeling that energy of like being a student. And I heard one of the workmen go by, and he said to his colleague, the abuela, she's been here a long time. And I thought, oh my God, it was such a good moment. It was just like, okay, back to reality. And then this was an early picture. I made it in 2015, 6:15 p.m., just before I left the building. And it always feels to me like my goodbye, even though I made it years before. Again, thank you to the design of the Pantone chair. And then I'm showing you the one last picture is, again, none of these photos exist without Renzo Piano. Had he not built that building and done the thing he did and foreseen those stripes of light, what would happen is buildings, I've now obviously studied them, are about light so often. And what was neat was I did a book. At a certain point, I went to Aperture, and they decided to publish a small book of office romance. And they had the idea, let's ask Renzo Piano to write the intro. He said yes, and he came to the Times building. It happened to be a day when I wasn't there, which was unusual. I was always there, but I wasn't there that day. This is where my seat was at that time. My cubicle was right by that east-facing wall, and they did the interview. Chris was the director at the time, Chris Boot of Aperture, went to interview him to kickstart Renzo's writing. And he drew that sketch for me that day, and he said, here, give this to her. So we had never met, and he gave me the sketch, and what I love is you look at that sketch, and everything he saw years later, a picture editor, me, was corresponding with, and we were having this dance with that light and those stripes. So I'm so grateful for that. It was always about two things. When you make a picture, it's because you love something, and I loved my colleagues. So the most important part was photographing them because I love them, and again, why it's so important to make a picture. But it's also about light, always for me, and somehow the light there turned on that, and now I'm doing the light and shadow in Lower Manhattan, which is where we live. So again, I have to stay close to home. Then I stayed in one building, and now I've expanded to, I don't know, maybe it's like 10 blocks. But I wanted to say just one other thing, and then are we doing questions? No time, so should I just end it now? No other thing? Okay. The one thing I want to say is we had the great pleasure. Scott and I went to the Picasso Museum today, and I just kept thinking about education. We had this terrific day yesterday with Natasha's class, and it was a nice exchange back and forth of talking photography. And in the Picasso Museum, the room that has all of his paintings that he did inspired by Las Meninas, it's amazing to me. He, at that point, was in his 70s, and he had done tons and tons of paintings. Clearly, he decided at that stage, as part of his education, I'm going to go to Velázquez and study that painting. And over, he reinvents it, changes it, brings to it. It's about color, it's about form, whatever he's doing. So that's what I wanted to end on. Thank you for having us here, because it's the continuing education for us, and I'm just trying to share with you some of what I learned along the way. But thank you. You guys, I really appreciate it. Thank you.